Thank you so much for joining the webinar, and I'm glad that you're able to learn a little bit more about endowments for nonprofits. Sustainability is something that all nonprofits want to achieve, and especially with fundraising, there are a lot of challenges, but I think the more that we understand the benefit of endowments, we'll see the need for organizations to step into focusing on endowments as well. So just a little bit of background information on American Muslim Community Foundation. Our vision is to lead sustainable and strategic Muslim philanthropy for today and future generations. And our mission is to cultivate donor giving and diversify funding to advance charitable causes. So we're really in the space to help the donor ecosystem and the nonprofit ecosystem kind of mesh together well. And I'll talk a little bit more about how we do that. So to give just a better understanding of what a community foundation is a publicly supported nonprofit institution that is governed by a board, and it serves its donors and the nonprofit sector and the entire community. And the way that we do this is, and the reason why we do this for the Muslim community in specific, is because there are over 700 community foundations across the United States, but none of them were for the Muslim community or by the Muslim community. So when we started in 2016, we wanted to make sure that we served the country, across the country, for all of the Muslim organizations and all of the Muslims in the country as well. So a lot of these community foundations that are set up, these are separate from family foundations, which many of us are familiar with as well. And these community foundations, some are national, some are regional, some have very specific focus on what they will and will not fund. So we wanted to create a national community foundation that would represent Muslim philanthropy. And that's how we started American Muslim Fund, which we are actually transitioning to name American Muslim Community Foundation. So you guys are the first to hear that we are going through that branding process. So over the next few months, you'll see us transitioning from using American Muslim Fund to American Muslim Community Foundation. So I wanted to let you in on who our leadership is. Our board president and one of our co-founders is Safa Ibrahim. She's been involved with CARE National for more than 20 years and several other mosques and community organizations over the last 20 years as well. She brings a wealth of knowledge to lead our team. Agnes Chong is a PhD and lawyer in nonprofits, and she is our vice president. Omar Hassan is a CFO of an investment firm in New Jersey and New York, and he's our treasurer. Ayman El Sawah is an IT security professional and one of our co-founders. Michael Ramos Lynch is an entrepreneur and lawyer in the Austin, Texas community. And Mariam Afzal is a banker, finance industry professional as well. So our advisory committee, we have a lot of people, but you can see kind of their skill set and where they fill a role at our organization. We are always looking for more people to join our advisory committee and also be involved on our board. So we're recruiting board members currently as well. And I am the sole staff member at American Muslim Community Foundation, and I serve as the Director of Development and Philanthropy and co-founder. So I wear many different hats, but my primary focus is on fundraising and also the building relationships with nonprofit organizations across the country. So just wanted to provide some breakdown of who the American Muslim community is across the country. This research was done by Pew Research Group in 2018. And as you can see, there's no one majority ethnic community in for Muslims in America, and it's pretty evenly spread, and it's a growing community as well. And part of that growth is our impact that we have civically. And I believe Engage USA and Impact provided these numbers that there's at least 1.5 million registered Muslim voters in the country. And with this being an election year, we see the importance of that. If you look at the IRS, they designate nonprofit organizations, and you can register as an Islamic organization, and there are over 5,500 Islamic charities registered with the IRS. There are over 2,000 mosques in America, and there are over 300 Muslim schools, whether that's part-time or full-time, with more than 40,000 students. And what's interesting is, there's over 1 million nonprofit organizations in America. But many of these nonprofits have small budgets, they have small staff, less than $250,000 of their budget, less than 2 full-time staff members, and that's common across the entire industry of nonprofits. So, we have with us Islamic Relief USA Waqf, and they're going to be talking about some of the larger institutions and their endowments as well. So, wrapping up with who American Muslims are, there was a study done by Dinar Standard several years ago that said that the American Muslim community has $124 billion of disposable income, and that the same Pew Research study said that there were about 3.5 million Muslims in America as well, and the Muslims are the largest non-Christian group in 20 states across the country. So I find that really fascinating. A lot of us know that, the first built mosque in the United States was in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. But who would have thought that in Nebraska or Kentucky that Muslims were such a large population as well? So this is a slide that I like to share that talks about the overall impact that Americans have with their charitable giving. Indiana University produces this report called Giving USA, and in 2018 they said that Americans gave $427 billion. And what's interesting is that on the right side you see that about 29% goes to religious institutions, and another 14% goes to educational institutions. So the lion's share of philanthropy is being given to those types of nonprofit organizations. And international affairs showed the largest growth in 2018 of any sector. And the pie chart on the left shows you the distribution of who is giving the money. So it says that 68% of the funds, about $292 billion, comes from individuals. And what's interesting to state is that the giving by bequest, the 9%, that's typically individuals as well. And what it means by bequest is as one passes away, they leave money in their will or their estate plan to nonprofit charities. And that 9% of about $39 billion comes from individuals as well. And the foundations, this is different than corporate foundations. So these foundations are family foundations, and they are larger institutions. So again, that 18%, the 9%, and 68%, that amounts to about 95% of charitable giving and generosity comes from individuals. About 5% of giving is done by corporations. So as a nonprofit, when you're thinking about the opportunity that exists to fundraise, a majority of it is with individuals. And with the next slide. All right. I think it jumped ahead a few slides, so give me a moment. I apologize. Of course, we always have to have our technical difficulties. All right. Okay, back on track. So the journey of American Muslim Fund transitioning into American Muslim Community Foundation all started back in 2016. I was working for the American Red Cross. I wanted to still be actively involved in the Muslim community. So I wanted to do something that wouldn't recreate the wheel, but would really set us apart as an institution. So I reached out to all of the nonprofit leaders that I knew, formed a team that you saw earlier, and we came together to create and construct a vision and mission, went through a strategic plan, and really started privately with the institution in 2016 and kind of launched it in 2017. So we designed a minimum viable product, we conceptualized how we would implement the strategic plan, and started raising funds. And luckily in 2017, we were able to raise $75,000 in operational funding. We started creating our donor advised funds, which I'll explain what those are. And we actually gave out $124,000 of grants in 2017. So as we continued to grow year over year, we expanded on our operations. We set up our own endowment. We received more funding in donor advised funds, which we call DAFs, and we gave out about $470,000 of grants in 2018. So last year, I joined full time at American Muslim Fund, and we were able to raise more funds in our operations. We were able to raise more funds in our endowment. We received more funding, restricted funding for our donor advised funds. And in 2019, we gave a total cumulative amount of $1.3 million in grants. And then we started offering what are called giving circles and hosting nonprofit endowments as well. So this year in 2020, we're looking to still recruit more members for our team as volunteers on our board, capacity build for ourselves, and seeing how we can scale our products and services. The different core services that we provide. So I've talked about donor advised funds, and a DAF is a giving vehicle that provides you with immediate tax benefits and allows you to support charities of your choice through grant recommendations on your own timetable. So when you open up your DAF, you immediately get the deduction, but then you can take the rest of your life to figure out where you want to distribute those funds. You can invest it for future growth, you can name it a family foundation, and you can really be more strategic with your giving. A giving circle is when a group of individuals come together and donate their money and time to a pooled fund and together decide which nonprofits they want to give to. A lot of cultures across the world have similar concepts that often uplift those communities. But this is specific to charitable giving and passing on those funds to nonprofit organizations. And then for nonprofit organizations, we provide services for endowments and fiscal sponsorship. So endowment is a financial resource in the form of a donation to be used as an investment. And when the investment generates an annual return based on the principal, it is then allowed to use that return on investment for their own operations and everything like that. And we'll talk a little bit more deeper about endowments and the benefit of that. The last service that we provide nonprofits and projects is what's called fiscal sponsorship. And that's where American Muslim Community Foundation will use our 501c3 status on behalf of another project. And we will collect funds and distribute receipts on behalf of that project and then pass the money on to the project where they're kind of outsourcing their administrative accounting to us for them. So a donor advised fund, again, it is convenient to use. It increases your giving potential because those funds can be invested for long-term growth. It has flexibility, and it allows you to get one consolidated tax receipt at the end of the year. With this being tax season time, instead of collecting 15, 20 different receipts from all the charities you give to, when you give to your donor advised fund first, you get that one consolidated tax receipt that you can then give to your CPA or financial advisor to do your taxes. At American Muslim Community Foundation, the minimum to establish a donor advised fund is $2,500. And that was based on the research done by Giving USA and Indiana University that says the average charitable household in the US gives $3,000. So we wanted to make this best practice of utilizing a donor advised fund accessible to the Muslim community across the country. There are other institutions like Fidelity and Chase and Schwab and so many other financial institutions that offer donor advised funds. And some of them have varying minimum commitments from $5,000 to $250,000. But the best part is when you partner with American Muslim Community Foundation, we understand the sanctity of zakat, and we also have grassroots relationships with hundreds of nonprofit organizations across the country. So we ask those families that set up a DAF that they have a 5-year commitment of utilizing their donor advised fund, and that when they make a gift to a nonprofit organization, the minimum distribution is $100. So there's a lot of benefit. You can look at our website and see our nonprofit directory to see where that $1.4 million from donor advised funds has gone to, and you can find that on our website. So here's just a visualization to give a better idea of what an endowment is. So if you start on the right side in the top where you see contributions, any amount that you give to your endowment, whether it's real estate property or cash or mutual funds or stocks, any assets that you contribute, that is considered the balance of your endowment. And then what we do is, in Sharia compliant methods, we invest those funds to create a return. And then the fees that American Muslim Fund and American Muslim Community Foundation and our partners who invest the funds will take their fees out of that. And the investment return can either be given back to the balance of the endowment or distribute to the nonprofit organization who has set up the endowment itself. So that's a very basic understanding of what an endowment is. And when you as a nonprofit organization are considering opening up an endowment, a lot of times you may look into setting up a separate 501c3 structure, recruiting a separate board organization to manage the entire process. You're submitting your own 990 documents every year. And those are some of the things that some smaller nonprofits just don't have the time, the skill set, the capacity to do. And that's where American Muslim Community Foundation steps in, because we handle that entire management process for you and simply have a memo of understanding with you as a nonprofit organization saying that American Muslim Community Foundation is handling all of the investment and management of your endowment for you. So all the nonprofit needs to do if they work with American Muslim Community Foundation is set aside the amount of money that they want to invest and sign an MOU with us. And you don't need to create like an application for a brokerage firm to invest for you and so many other hoops that you would need to go through to set up an endowment on your own. So we really make it a lot easier for nonprofit organizations to come to the table with whatever amount of investment they're comfortable with whether it's a percentage of your revenue or say just $10,000, or maybe you have the capacity to do $200,000. But a lot of times the challenge is when you go to an investment firm, they may require that you come to the table with $250,000 or $500,000 just to open an account with them. So we try to take all of that burden away and work with the nonprofit organization directly and manage all of those things for them, coming in at a level that they're comfortable with to invest. So I hope that explains kind of the benefit of working with American Muslim Community Foundation. So I wanted to share some examples of endowments through Islamic history, and I know Erum is going to share some as well. But at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when he was living in Medina, there was a plot of land that had a well on it. And the individual that owned that land was interested in selling it. So the Prophet at that time had asked his companions, who can purchase this land for the benefit of the Muslim community here in Medina, and at the price of a place in paradise. So when Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu heard that, he said that he would purchase that land. And to this day, that land is still operating as an endowment for the Muslim community and of benefit to Muslims in the area. And that is the impact and the foresight that an endowment and a waqf can have. There were two sisters, Fatima Fihri and Maryam Fihri, who also set up endowments in Morocco. So the University of Al-Qarawiyyin is the world's oldest university, and it was set up by Fatima Fihri, and the Al-Andalus Mosque was set up by her sister, Maryam al-Fihri. So these are just a few examples of the impact that an endowment can have. When you set aside funds and have a specific purpose for it, the return on those investments can go to support the operations of an institution. Before handing it off to Erum, I wanted to let you all know that American Muslim Community Foundation has a request for proposals currently where we are actually giving nonprofit organizations $5,000. We will be selecting 3 nonprofit organizations, and the intent is so that they can start an endowment. So if you know of nonprofit organizations that do not have an endowment currently, they are able to apply for this grant and receive funding from American Muslim Community Foundation and hopefully start an endowment. So again, we will be giving $5,000 to 3 organizations, and you can find out more information on our website. And the link is there on the screen. So I highly encourage each and every one of you to share this with your favorite nonprofits in the community and encourage them to learn more. And we'll have time for Q&A after Erum as well, if you have questions specifically about endowments in general or how to start one at American Muslim Community Foundation. Thank you, and Erum, take it away.
Thanks so much, Muhi. So Muhi did a wonderful job explaining kind of how an endowment is structured, and he gave a few historical examples of endowments. I wanted to walk you through the process of why we at Islamic Relief USA chose to go about this, kind of how our endowment is structured and the benefits of us having an endowment at our organization. And one of the reasons kind of that really led us to this decision of having an endowment is its place in Islamic history and Islamic tradition. Throughout Islamic tradition, this concept has existed, and it's been called a waqf, which in Arabic means still, unmoving, preserved, kind of self-contained, and it's a legal instrument essentially that sets aside certain resources forever to be used for the betterment of our communities. And it can be used not only to provide immediate necessities such as healthcare or such as disaster relief, but also to strengthen institutions that conduct business for those in need, such as nonprofit organizations, community centers, and masajid. And it is considered a Sadaqah Jariyah donation, so a donation where you can reap the benefits of it after you have passed. Some kind of throughout history, this concept has been gaining momentum. One of the earliest examples of a waqf was Masjid Quba and Masjid an-Nabawi in Medina, established by Prophet ﷺ. And his companions followed in this example, as Muhi mentioned. Another example is Umar bin Khattab, who actually acquired a piece of land in Khaybar, and when he went to the Prophet ﷺ and he asked what he should do with this land, Prophet ﷺ encouraged him to set it up as an endowment so that the fruits of the land can go to charity forever, perpetually, as Sadaqah Jariyah. And so that's what Umar bin Khattab did, and he formulated that as a waqf. Throughout Islamic history, throughout the Ottoman Empire specifically, this idea kind of reached a peak where if you were to pass through Muslim lands, you would see these Waqf dotted throughout these lands, not only supporting communities within the area, but also providing reprieve to travelers that would come regardless of their background or religious affiliation. And they became these sort of spectacular examples of what these sustainable systems of development could do. And that's kind of what we wanted to do with Islamic Relief. We're an organization that has been around for about 26 plus years in the United States. A lot of our processes so far had been focused on really meeting the immediate short-term needs of our community, and we wanted to expand on that and start thinking about the long-term needs of our community and how we can serve as an institution for generation to come. One of the reasons we felt prepared to take on this project is because of the amount of time where we've been operating within the United States. We have a 4-star rating on Charity Navigator, which is the highest rating you can have as a charity, and it indicates transparency and accountability in our organization. We conducted research on endowments and their operations, and we trained ourselves and our fundraising teams for planned giving best practices. And then finally, we launched this endowment program that would model these best practices. So I'm going to play you a video that we generally introduce to our donors to let them know kind of what it is that we're doing in our Waqf program.
If you've ever traveled to Istanbul, Turkey, you've no doubt visited the Süleymaniye complex, a grand multifunctional space consisting of a mosque, a medical school, a hospital, a public kitchen, and more. It is one of the most incredible examples of a waqf in Islamic history. A notable example of the waqf today is the Jerusalem Islamic Waqf. Some form of this waqf has managed Islamic complexes in the Old City of Jerusalem since the year 1187 and has been sustaining it through changing political climates. In this way, the waqf can serve as a legal protection for organizations as well, ensuring its charitable efforts to continue in perpetuity. Following in this remarkable Islamic tradition of the Waqf, today Islamic Relief USA is excited to announce the launch of IRUSA Waqf, an endowment aiming to protect the work we do for our communities and ensuring we can do it for years to come. What is a Waqf? In simple terms, a Waqf is an endowment created by a community for the benefit of the most vulnerable amongst the community. How does it work? You as a donor contribute an amount to IRUSA Waqf. This can be in the form of cash, real estate, stocks and bonds, donor-advised funds, or any means appropriate for you. A team of our talented financial experts invest your donation in Sharia-compliant investment portfolios. The returns of your donation fund IRUSA charitable efforts, while your original donation is maintained. In this way, your original donation can support Islamic relief programs in perpetuity as Sadaqah Jariyah. But why should you donate? How does this benefit you as a donor? Through your donation, you are able to support Islamic relief projects around the world. You can earn a tax benefit, you can earn an investment back through the trust, and you are leaving a legacy, a Sadaqah Jariyah. To learn more about what we do and to become a part of our movement, visit our website at irusawaqf.org. IRUSA Waqf, reviving tradition, building legacy.
Great. So that kind of introduces you to how we have set up the endowment to operate within our organization. I wanted to clarify some of the things that we've mentioned, just so if you're interested in starting an endowment of your own, you're familiar with some of the resources that you need. For us, we established our endowment as a separate 501c3 supporting organization of Islamic Relief USA. The purpose of this was to serve as a legal protection for the funds and to house them in their own entity. We did form a separate board for the endowment, since a lot of the endowment management processes require a level of, technical investment expertise. And here are the folks who are on our board. So we have Amir Maiman and Saqib Rashid, who are the investment chairs. They make the decisions regarding our asset management, and they both have a significant amount of experience in this field and studied at the Wharton School together. We have Hamadi bin Gapsia, who is Vice President at the Viacom CBS Tax Department and a certified Sharia advisor, familiar with AOC standards. And we also have Sami Shaban, who is an attorney and an entrepreneur. So we formed this board. We formed a separate legal, organization called IRUSA Waqf to house our funds. And currently, we have $8 million, actually closer to $10 million of funds within this endowment that we are investing. If you look at sort of the competing organizations within the United States who offer welfare services and relief services, we have the American Red Cross and United Way, each of which have over $1 billion in funding. But as you can see, they kind of have a head start on us by 100+ years. And so what we'd really like to do is to offer this as a resource for our donors and kind of invest in this infrastructure to build this type of sustainability. And we're aiming not only for us to do this, but inshallah for Islamic organizations across the United States to do this, so that we have this lens on sustainability. Currently, we invested $4.8 million of our funds, and they grew to $5.7 million, which is the growth of $854,000 and an ROI of 17.7%. Just to put that into perspective, endowments are normally aiming for between an 8 to 10% growth, considering that they invest safely. But because, alhamdulillah, it's been a great year for fund growth and development, we were able to do really well, and it's kind of a demonstration of how well our asset management team is performing. And we're excited to be able to share this data with our donors and with community members. And if folks have interest, any questions about how we're investing or kind of what our policies are and things we have to do, I'd be happy to answer those afterwards. Throughout this whole process, from 2017 onwards, we've really been aiming to emulate as many best practices as possible in this launching and management of an endowment. And we've come up with some strategies, some things that we've learned that we can impart onto other organizations. One of the biggest of these is that before you start to launch an endowment, you want to make sure you have leadership and organizational buy-in. You want to make sure, considering how big of a change this is going to be in your overall strategic plan. You're suddenly not thinking about your short-term needs, you're thinking about your long-term needs and how to budget for them, and where does that funding come from, and how do you strengthen and develop your team. All of those become a part of your strategic plan. So the first thing you want to do is make sure all of your leadership, your executive teams, and your boards are in sync and ready to take this on. Next, you want to make sure that you're including your endowment goals as part of your overall strategic plan. So it has its own priority. Who is going to be managing this? What bucket is this funding going to come from? How are you going to implement this, overall idea? What are the steps you're going to take within your organization to do that? And so in your strategic plan, make sure you have your endowment goals there. Also, as you're launching an endowment, you're essentially launching a planned giving program within your organization, right? You're thinking about future planning, and you're encouraging your donors to do the same, which means that if a donor comes to you and a donor wants to leave you in their will, or create a donor advised fund, or set up a trust and list you as a beneficiary, as an organization, you have to be prepared administratively to be able to handle those requests. On our end, we set up an infrastructure of partner organizations that we work with to make sure that we're doing this as transparently and efficiently as possible, and also in line with Sharia compliance standards. As an Islamic endowment, we have a lot of responsibility towards the funds that our donors are giving us, and so we want to make sure that everything is as compliant as it can be. So, sometimes donors will have questions about what is zakat and what is sadaqah jariyah, and if a donor comes to us and says, I want to leave this much of my estate to this charity, you have to make sure that you have folks on your team who can understand those parameters, who can set up the Sharia compliance structures, who can answer your donor questions, etc. And you need an asset management team to make sure your funds are being managed efficiently and effectively and in line with these rules and regulations. Ideally, in the research that we've done with the Lilly School, an organization will be ready to do this if they have 10 plus years of experience. Those 10 plus years are essentially to set up the infrastructure within your own organization, have your own policies and procedures and teams in play, but also in order to recruit donors to donate in this way, the ideal endowment donor is one who has been giving loyally to your organization for 10 plus years. And so this is something that I would just like to highlight. With Muhi's organization, as he mentioned, he's able to support smaller nonprofits that may not have some of these teams in play and serve as kind of the middle organization that can take the burden of some of these management techniques and carry them. So Muhi, I'm gonna lead it to you. Do you want to highlight some of the things, in these buckets that your organization is providing folks who are interested in starting their endowments. For us, for Islamic Relief, these things are self-contained. We actually have teams within Islamic Relief that are doing all of these, including our asset management team, which is members of our board.
Assalamualaikum. Thank you so much, Erum, for sharing all of that wonderful information. Yeah, I think, it's interesting. All nonprofit organizations are at different phases and different stages. So in terms of, I really like what you said about embedding the endowment as part of the strategic plan, right? And making sure that we provide enough thought to the endowment as part of the equation from the beginning. So as your nonprofit organizations consider the next steps of your growth, and the next time your board has a meeting, feel free to rely on Erum or myself as a resource to you to kind of see how your organization can start implementing some of these things. And we can help you guide you through that. So really, I want to open it up to everybody in the presentation to kind of just ask general questions and use the rest of our time in making sure that you have a better understanding of what an endowment is, how you can start your endowment, and really just ask those questions that you want to, that we maybe didn't answer for you. So feel free to type in your questions into the chat feature, and we'll be sure to read them there, or take yourself off of mute and ask as well. We should have planted a person to ask the first question.
Hey, Assalamualaikum, Muhi. This is Faisal. Can you hear me?
Yes, wa alaikum assalam. Thanks for joining.
Okay, so I'll be the plant for the first question. I actually had a question about something you were referencing earlier. First of all, thanks for putting this together. Excellent program. Very informative. I appreciate it. I had a question about your comment about the balance of donations that are coming from individuals versus institution, and I didn't know if anybody had looked into. Do you feel that is where the potential is, or do you feel that is where we've been focused as a community, and that there is a lot of potential in institutional funding, but we just haven't become sophisticated enough to touch that or to reach out to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that our community has been very hyper-focused on event-based fundraising, but majority of that, sometimes they're good with getting sponsorships from businesses and other organizations. So there is definitely a lot that our community can improve upon in terms of building deeper relationships. But I think that in terms of what the research shows is that there is enough wealth in the individual community to sustain our nonprofit organizations. And something that a lot of us are often familiar with is the idea of donor fatigue, right? And instead of donor fatigue, we like to think of this as it only exists when nonprofit organizations don't have the capacity to properly steward the relationship with a donor. And whether that donor is an institution, a foundation, a corporation, we need to be implementing the best practices of this nonprofit fundraising industry to make sure that we're being relational and not transactional. And when our community is so hyper focused on an event based model for generating revenue for our nonprofits, oftentimes it feels transactional. So I think that the research shows that there's enough opportunity within the individuals to continue to fundraise. So I hope that answers your question. I think, I was really excited to see that Islamic Relief had all of their fundraising staff members get certified in fundraising management. I think that's fantastic through Indiana University and the resources that are available to our community. So I think the more we can get our institutions to hire fundraising staff, to get them trained in the best practices, we'll be able to create relational experiences in fundraising. And I think that's also why American Muslim Community Foundation started, was to shift our community into this best practice of building relationships between the nonprofit organizations and the donors through donor advised funds. So I hope that answers your question. And I see that there are some questions in the chat.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Faisal. So there's some questions. How soon after an organization has launched can they begin the endowment process? And this was asked by Yelda Ahmadi. So Yelda, it's really when you feel, or when the organization feels that they're ready for it. Some of the research that is out there, I think that what Erum had shared was that it's best capable when an organization has a long-standing history of like 10 years or more, so that they have familiarity in the community, that people want to see the longevity of the organization, and things like that. American Muslim Community Foundation makes it easier to partner with nonprofits to take care of the management aspect of an endowment. So if an organization has funds readily available, they could start right away. Whether the organization is just newly founded or if it has been around for 5, 10, 20 years. So we are utilizing our expertise as nonprofit organizations, as a financial investment team, as a committee and resource to the community to take care of a lot of those different steps that traditionally an organization would need to look into and build into their strategic plan and all of those things. But if the board is of consensus and thinks that they should focus on an endowment, we are here to step in and play a pivotal role in helping nonprofit organizations build that long-term sustainability. So Yelda, I hope that answers your question. And then Sarah Ismail joined and asked, I want to create a nonprofit, and I've heard that you can use a for-profit to donate 40% of its profits to your nonprofit, so I don't have to utilize ads, events, subscriptions, etc. So I think, definitely nonprofit institutions can partner with for-profits, or I've heard of other, at the University of Michigan, they have real estate property, or other institutions and nonprofits may go set up a business venture to create additional revenue, or we're familiar with a lot of mosques that have a commercial building that they rent out to tenants, and the revenue from that commercial property then goes to support the operations of the nonprofit entity. So I personally don't know if there's a limit of how much the for-profit can donate to the nonprofit organization, but I'm sure there are successful models of how you can look into that. And Erum, do you have anything you want to add to Sarah's question about that?
No, I think you summed it up pretty well. I think it really, I don't know what the state by state regulations are on a nonprofit donating to, or a for profit donating to a nonprofit. So I think it would depend on where you're based. But that's certainly a model that you could use if you have a for profit that it wants to support some of your operational costs as a nonprofit.
Great. Do you want to take any of the other questions in the chat, Erum?
Yes, let me see what else we have. Oh, I think the next one is for you, Muhi. It's about the endowment grant that your organization is offering.
Wonderful. So I see Arif and Fatima from New Horizons School in Pasadena. If we have already established a legal endowment but not funded, can we still apply for this grant? Also, does the endowment need...
You're on mute.
Okay, sorry about that. So if a nonprofit already has an endowment set up, we are trying to work with nonprofit organizations that do not have an endowment already established. But I will try to get further clarity to see, since you don't have any assets in the endowment, whether it's something that we can still work with you on. So I will get back to you, Arafa and Fatima, on that specifically. And then Arjuman Yusuf has a question. Our school is only in its 5th year of operation with a small board and doesn't have the resources for a separate team to manage an endowment. How much support does AMCF provide? We are interested in applying for the endowment grant of $5,000. Is that enough to start an endowment, or is it better to get someone to match it and start with an investment of $10,000? That's a fantastic question. We are hoping to help start nonprofit organizations and their endowments at whatever level they are comfortable with. And the idea being that, of course, a smaller endowment won't generate as much revenue on the return of investment, right? So just for easy math, if you only started with that $5,000 and there was a 10% return, you'd be looking at about $500. So obviously it's not going to cover a lot of operational funding, but maybe it'll cover the cost of one program or one area in which your school could benefit from. And I love the incentive to utilize this grant opportunity as a match. So, obviously definitely apply, go through our website on the grants section and review the request for proposal and the letter of intent. And if your nonprofit organization is already in our nonprofit directory, then all you need to do is submit the LOI. Hopefully that answers your question, Arjuman, and I think it's a great idea to try to get more funding into the endowment so that you can try to get a return on investment that will be more, help your organization be more sustainable going forward. Okay. And then I know, Sarah, you had asked for a 1 to 2 minute summary of what we discussed. We are recording this, so we will share out the presentation and the recording as well. So hopefully those of you can review it as well. But again, just in general, like, you know, an endowment is a way for nonprofit organizations to set aside financial resources to be further invested, and the return on that investment is what is given back to the organization for them to use on their operations or a specific program. And Erum was talking about Islamic Relief's growth and how they opened up the IRUSA Waqf as a separate organization, and through that. So we will definitely share this out with everybody who registered. Does anybody else have additional comments? Feel free to put it in the chat box or share over the phone. So Sarah's question is, how do you guarantee extra income via endowment is halal? So the investments that we do are only through Sharia compliant investment firms, and similar to Erum mentioning on IRUSA Waqf's board, they have somebody who is an advisor through an organization which is called AOFI, and they go through to make sure that the investment strategy is considered Sharia compliant. So based on those relations, we maintain that the investment strategy and what we are doing is Sharia compliant and halal. Erum, feel free to add in as well.
Yeah, certainly. I think I've summed that up pretty well. In our processes, we go through every single potential investment and ensure that that investment is Sharia compliant, because our own organization is managing the funds. We're self-managing them. However, there are also organizations that can do that. And so if you reach out to portfolio managers that are experts in Sharia compliant investing, then you can kind of utilize those folks. So like Muhi said, if we were a smaller organization, or perhaps we didn't have someone who was an advisor and understood these Sharia compliance questions, then perhaps I would go to Muhi and his organization and I would say, will you manage these assets in a Sharia compliant way for me? Or you can partner with a scholar in your community who is also versed in these, Sharia compliant investment processes, who will be willing to serve as your advisors for these investments. So you can go to that person. So the kind of limiting factor here is, who are your resources and who can you go to when these questions come up?
Great. Thank you. Yalda also asked, is there someone we can email directly if we have additional questions about our organization's eligibility? Definitely. Feel free to reach out to me directly, or just grants@amuslimcf.org, and one of our team members can get back to you as well. So I'll share that in the chat box so everybody has it.
Oh, one other thing I wanted to add to Sarah's question earlier, the consideration is actually also, are the returns halal, but also is your donation collection process up to par. So for example, if I have a donor call me during Ramadan and say, I have not paid my zakat for this many years, I want to contribute this large amount to your Waqf program, the onus is actually on me to be able to either connect that donor to someone who can speak with that donor about where those charitable funds can go, or to be well versed enough to be able to answer that donor's questions, such as in that specific case, their zakat donation cannot go to the Waqf fund because that's a Sadaqah Jariyah donation. And so if a stipulation for a zakat fund is that it must go directly to the beneficiary. And so there are a lot of these questions that come up, especially as donors are considering their wills, how much of their estate can they actually leave to a charitable organization, those type of questions. And so in terms of overall Sharia compliance, I would definitely advise there's someone on your team who's familiar with these processes.
Yeah, you make a great point, Erum. And definitely there's difference of opinion amongst scholars, religious scholars, financial religious scholars, on how much can be left to to charity from your estate. And I've commonly heard up to 1/3 of your estate can be left, and then the rest goes in accordance to the Sharia compliance of leaving it to family members and others involved. And then similarly with whether or not zakat can be invested, there's usually a timeline from when you calculate your zakat to when you distribute your zakat. And some scholars state that it needs to be done within 1 year from when you calculate it to being distributed to recipients. So there's always a difference of opinion. Research the topic and come to a conclusion that you are comfortable with in making your decision of how to utilize your zakat. And we will definitely be sharing the slides with the group as well as the recording. Wonderful. Okay, if that is it, we can close out. Is there anything else that you'd like to share, Erum?
No, I think that's great. If anyone has any questions, about our endowment or, wants to know some of the more technical things and kind of how we operate, feel free to reach out to me directly. I'll send a message with my email to the group, but we're happy to serve as a resource.
Wonderful. We'll just close out with Surah Al-Asr. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ